I'm often fascinated when I see teams move from the forming to the storming stage of the team development lifecycle, because at the core of the storming phase is where a lot of the adversarial relationships are formed. And when we speak about the storming phase of the team development lifecycle, we often talk about it specifically between employees or at the team level, and we exclude management from this discussion. And I think it's in part because sometimes management forgets that they're a part of the team, and employees also sometimes forget that management is a part of the team. They just have and play different roles. And so sometimes there is an adversarial relationship because there isn't enough transparency, or there isn't enough understanding that we are all on the same team, both management and employee. And in my experience, there are a number of reasons why an adversarial relationship would be created during this storming phase, but there are a few that stick out the most to me. The first being changes in ways of working. Change is an inevitable part of life. And in the professional arena, as technological advancements continue to accelerate at a speed that is honestly unfathomable by many of us, we're going to have to learn how to move quickly to a point of acceptance of change. And I feel like in some instances, people have pacified the conversation around change to be something that people have an option of not doing. And when you're talking about an organization of people, any living being, an organization of people is an entity. It's an entity that's constantly changing and growing. People are coming and going and retiring and all of these kinds of things. And so change is inevitable, because as you begin to consolidate ideas in the minds of many people, there are always going to be different perspectives that are considered as you all collectively move towards the common goal. And so the discussion of changes in the ways of working is really important for management and employees to sit with and to talk about as a team, because I believe that through those honest conversations, those candid conversations about changes that are happening and what employees and management can do to adapt to those changes, I think those conversations, if they happen in the appropriate way and in the most transparent way, understanding that change is inevitable, that organizations and teams will move more quickly past the storming phase of the team development lifecycle. Another cause of the adversarial relationship that I've found is where there is a feeling among teams of a lack of support. Now, lack of support can work both ways, where the team does not feel like they are receiving the support that they need in order to get their jobs done, and conversely, management feeling like they aren't getting the support that they need from their teams to get their jobs done. When I talk to some teams, there's a sense that management doesn't do anything. And what people quickly learn when they move from being an individual contributor to a manager is that managers do a lot. It's just a different type of work. But people often look at their work as a one-way street, where management or management sometimes may look at the team as a tool to be drawn, or a resource to be drawn on, versus a group of people that are to be poured into. And my perspective on the matter is that when we understand that it's a reciprocal relationship, and that the team is not only supporting management, but management is also supporting the team, we can begin to have a more healthy conversation about what that looks like. And that conversation is often about perspective, which moves me to the next reason that I found for the adversarial relationship during the storming phase of the team development life cycle, which is a lack of perspective. I remember talking to a colleague one day, and she came to me furious because the leadership in our organization had a requirement that she didn't agree with. She felt like it was a stupid requirement, and that all they had to do was just, accept her response as it was. And she was working on the team that I was leading at the time, one of the managers on the team that I was leading, and I talked her through her issue and helping her to understand that there are sometimes situations where you can't fathom what is happening at different levels of management because they can't necessarily relinquish that information. However, there is a reason why they're asking for the information that they're asking for. Now, this was management that I was reporting to as well. And so while I understood and could empathize with her feeling that the task was not a task that needed to be done, I also had a very candid conversation about her understanding that there's sometimes going to be things that we have to do as part of our jobs, and we may not necessarily have the perspective that is needed. But when we have that trust that the questions are being asked because there is a genuinely good reason, we can begin to have a more healthy discussion about whatever the tasking is, because we do so much to get into these organizations. We interview, we talk about our past, our strengths, our weaknesses. We go through multiple rounds, then only to come into the organization and complain about what we're not going to do, when much of those things might even be within our job responsibilities. And so, when I'm seeing a situation that might rear its ugly head as lack of perspective, I tend to either offer the perspective or let people know that you may not necessarily understand what that other person is going through. So if it's within your power to accomplish, let's figure out how we can accomplish it together. And the last thing that I've noticed that causes the adversarial relationship is a blatant lack of respect. Now, this one can be a really challenging one, because when there is a lack of respect, if it is not addressed quickly and swiftly, it can cause the situation to become very toxic. And this is in situations where management is not respectful of the employee and the employee is not respectful of management, because somewhere along the line there was a lack or a disrespect for the roles that the individual plays. And sometimes people feel like they can do the job better than the manager, or the manager feels like they can do the job better than the employee. But the fact of the matter is both individuals are in the roles that they are in for whatever reason. And so in operating in those roles, we have to understand how to best support the person that was selected for that role. If you're the quarterback and you feel like you could be doing a better job than the running back, and that's not really your role, then you still have to figure out how to encourage and support that person in the role that you've been assigned. And so if you know that the running back is not able to perform certain things on the field or tasks on the field, perhaps adapting your strategy when dealing with that individual is an appropriate course of action. And that's just an example from football. I'm sure that there are a number of examples that I can provide. But overall, most of what I'm talking about is vulnerability. I feel like when we are more vulnerable with one another in the workplace, whether it be talking about changes in ways of working and whether or not we have an option to say no to the change, whether it be about our feelings of lack of support or our lack of perspective on what's actually happening so that we can get our jobs done. Or even lastly, just the lack of respect. Being more vulnerable about the sources of those feelings and those causes of the adversarial relationship can help move the relationship forward, because vulnerability comes from the heart. And when we start to learn how to lead with our heart, you create an environment that is more loving, that is more psychologically safe for everyone involved. And so if you are a leader or an employee in an environment where you don't feel psychologically safe, or you're in the middle of the storming phase of your team development life cycle, try leading with vulnerability, because it's through vulnerability that you can begin to establish a more safe and positive relationship. And from that more safe and positive relationship, you can begin to be more creative and flourish as a team.